We're going to look at the HSL or Hue Saturation Luma keyer, one of the most powerful tools within Resolve, and we're going to look at how to pull keys by using the manual controls and also the eyedropper as well. The HSL keyer allows us to qualify based on hue, saturation and luma. I can tell Resolve that for this node I just want to work with bright, highly saturated red pixels or dark, low saturation blue pixels. In this shot, let's say I want to work with the foliage in the background, so I can tell Resolve that I want to work with green pixels of both medium and high brightness and saturation. This allows us to make extremely powerful targeted adjustments to regions of the image based on the colors within. It can also be used in conjunction with our other secondary qualification tools in order to make very accurate qualifications. So let's review the controls first, and we will go back to this gradient in order to do that. So the first thing we want to do is expose the keyer controls. We do that by clicking the eyedropper down here. And these three bars, the HSL keyer, this is what we're looking for. So let's take a look at the first of these three bars. This is hue. And we all know what hue is by now, the actual color, red, green, yellow, etc. This bar allows us to tell Resolve what colors we want to work with for this node. Have a width setting, and as I drag it to the left you can see that these two bounds down here come in to describe a box that gets smaller as I drag to the left and bigger as I drag to the right. Everything within this box inside these two black lines is qualified, and everything outside is disqualified, and on any given node we only work with the qualified pixels. So we have a width setting. Now I want to place this box around the green hues, and width alone isn't going to do that. So we also have center, and I can drag center to the right to move the box to the right, or center to the left to move the box to the left. So I will move this box and drop it over the green values and bring the width in, just so I don't get yellows or cyans as well. Now, at this point we want to review our key. We can't just guess as we're doing this. So I want to go up to the upper left of the viewer window, and I want to hit the highlight icon, this kind of two semicircles on a stripy background up here. When I do that, I'm going to see everything that I've qualified is going to be visible, and everything that is outside of the qualification is going to be grayed out, neutral gray. And also, look at what has happened to the vector scope. What you'll notice is we're kind of cutting a triangular pizza slice out of the vector scope. As I bring out width, it will increase in size, and I can make it thinner as well. Keep the idea of this shape in your head. It can make learning to qualify things much easier when you're first starting out. Essentially, we're drawing a shape on the vector scope that contains the values that we want to work with. Now I've got center and I've got width, but I've got some very hard edges on this qualification, which generally speaking is no good. I've also got soft. Now as I drag soft out, you can see we have these two triangular elements of our box which come out, and these show us the fall off of our qualification. Anything inside the box is qualified, anything outside the box is disqualified, and anything within a triangle is partially qualified. We'll have a kind of transparency up here in the key, with higher opacity towards the center and lower eventually to 0 towards the pointy end of the triangle. Now you can use these controls and drag them, but you can also click and drag the box in the bar as well. I just find it easier to use these controls because I've just been doing that for years now. So I don't want too many yellow values. And I've got one last control here. Let's say for argument's sake, I want to get rid of the yellow values on the right-hand side. I've got symmetry, and as I drag symmetry in, I can take the triangle away on one side or on the other. And in this case, I want to bring the triangle in on the yellow side just so I get fewer yellow values qualified. This is normally if we have one particular hue we just really want to avoid, but the feathering of or the soft of our qualification is making us hit it. Useful to be aware of, but you don't always use it. So we've got our hue qualification here. The next step is saturation. Now saturation is trickier to work with. It's very very heavily weighted towards the left-hand side of this bar. We don't use the whole thing, not by a long shot. Now, saturation and also luma, for that matter, don't have width and center controls. They have low, high, low soft, and high soft. Low will bring up the left-hand side, and you'll see as we go down to black, black has a saturation value of 0. We're pushing the lower saturation values out of our qualification. And if I bring in high, nothing happens at first. It's because I have to bring high right down before it starts to push things out. We only really use this kind of, I don't know, left-hand 20% of the saturation bar in the HSL keyer. Now again, I've got hard edges, so I can add some soft. But before we jump right into that, look at what the low saturation range is doing to the shape in our vector scope. It's kind of cutting off the pointy part of the pizza slice. We're losing these low saturation values. So instead of a pizza slice, we now have a section of a ring on our vector scope, and everything within that section of a ring are the values that we're working with. Again, keep this shape on the vector scope in mind. Think about the shape you need to make on the vector scope to include the values that you want to work with, and we'll see how this works in a real shot a little bit later. Now, I've also got low soft and high soft. I'll bring high back in again. And you can see now I can make quite an accurate adjustment that works with a very specific range of hue and saturation values. If I click highlight again, anything I do on this node will only take place within the qualified region. I will go back to highlight. And now we have luminance. To better explain luminance, I'm going to reset saturation. Now, I've made a gradient that goes from full color down to black here. And the reason I did that is because it will go up to from full saturation down to 0 saturation. But black is also 0 brightness. So if I bring the low range up, and I have to bring it up a fair way, we'll start to push out the darker values. Now, generally speaking, darker values tend to have lower saturation. So often a combination of the low range on saturation and the low range on luminance can push any troublesome shadows out of our qualification, and we'll see that later on. But the controls down here are the same as saturation: low, high, low, soft, high, soft, and we can then pound that in with our saturation qualification controls and make a very specific shape here. So these are the general manual controls, and we can pull keys entirely manually. When I'm working on a control surface, I just do this out of force of habit. I like to just twiddle with the spinny knobs and just make a qualification this way. I don't even use eyedroppers most of the time. If it's a keyboard and mouse, I start with the eyedropper. So let's take a look at how we do that on a real shot. So the first things first, I want to make sure that I have a new and empty node, which I've already got up here. If we add a qualification to a node containing a primary grade, we will constrain that primary grade to the qualification we make, thus it will become a secondary and it won't hit the entire shot. So let's take a look at how we can get started with the eyedroppers. I've got a range of eyedropper tools down here, and by default the basic eyedropper is selected. Now I can go around and I can just click, left click and drag, and as long as I have highlight mode active, I will see the key that I'm pulling updated live in the viewer as I pull it. Now, the default eyedropper doesn't add. If I want to add more to this key, if I click again, it will start again. So I'll get started here. Next, we have subtractive. We'll do that in a second. We've now got an additive picker, and I can click, and that will add to the key that I've pulled. Notice that we've got some kind of reddish orange bokeh back here, and that's causing us to isolate the skin tones as well, which we don't want to do. The hair and the skin are getting pulled into this foliage key. So let's see if the subtractive eyedropper can help us. Really. This is why I tend to get started with the default eyedropper and then dial it in with the manual controls, which is what we're going to do right now. I've got the start of a key, but if I play this, this is what we call chatter, and we're going to have to try and make a key that's more stable before we can use it. So I want to really look at the image. I can see some greens up here, some greens here. I don't want to make the shadows more colourful, and I don't want to hit the reds back here either. So I'm going to expand the greens, and I'm going to make it softer. As I'm softening this down, I'm hitting the hair so I can bring symmetry in on the left-hand side to squeeze out the yellows. That's a good use case for symmetry. Expand width, push that out, and bring up the low saturation, and I can soften that out because it does help with the chatter a bit if we use a soft range. And now I think I'm going to just squeeze those shadows out as much as I can. That's high, not low. And now, still bits of chatter, but a much more stable and accurate key. What I can do now is I can add a bit more green to the foliage. Anything I do will only hit the key. And I just want to bring the greens in here out a little bit. Not too much because it starts to look a bit goblin green otherwise. What I might do is I might push it into the highlights and then bring the saturation down. And now you can see we've just made a targeted adjustment to the foliage, making it pop a little more. Now, we've got a basic usable key. We've made a very mild adjustment, so the bits of chatter we have down here, they don't concern me too much. We can see a little bit of spill if I turn it off and on again. If I zoom right in, we can see the bits of green bokeh down here are getting more colourful. That doesn't bother me too much, and within the general kind of feel of this shot, I think that's acceptable. But I could go back in and I could bring low sat in a bit to exclude those values, clean up the key. Oops, keep missing. Terrible at FPS games. I miss everything. So now we've got quite a nice accurate key for the foliage, and we've made a slight adjustment to the green values within. So we've already seen the problem we have with chatter, and we still do have elements of chattering within this key. So we need to be able to fix that for more important colors. What we're going to do in the next lecture is we're going to key out the skin tones and the hair of this actor and make some adjustments within. But we're going to have to fix any chattering problems we come across. And to do that, we're going to use the matte finesse controls on the right-hand side down here. So first, have a bit of a play around with this shot, see what you can key, and then click on through to the next lecture once you're ready.